Why some say Exxon's net zero pledge is meaningless. ExxonMobil's board of directors has said that the company's goal is to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. The commitment is rather insignificant, though, because it only aims to achieve net zero in its operations. In other words, it excludes any emissions resulting from the company's products being burned, which accounts for the great bulk of the emissions for which Exxon is responsible. Exxon's target was confined to emissions from Scope 1 and Scope 2 operations, as well as the energy utilized to power those operations. Customers' use of its products, on the other hand, account for about 85% of the company's overall emissions. According to climate scientists, these so-called Scope 3 emissions, which include pollutants from up and down the supply chain, are typically the largest source of emissions for any corporation, and any objective that ignores them is weak. But it's particularly problematic for an oil corporation like ExxonMobil, which claims to have emitted 762 million metric tons of CO2 in 2020, with 650 million tons of that as Scope 3 emissions. Other fossil fuel firms have made net zero commitments that include Scope 3 emissions. BP and Shell, for example, are much more eager to discuss Scope 3 emissions from the combustion of their products. Despite this, there are still gaps. To balance its emissions, Shell, for example, would need to plant an area of trees the size of Italy by 2050. Occidental Petroleum intends to absorb carbon from the atmosphere to offset Scope 3 emissions, and while that technology exists, it has yet to be validated on a large, commercial scale. Other companies are going even further. Ørsted, a Danish energy business that used to generate oil and gas products, is transitioning to a renewable energy utility entirely, and working to reduce Scope 3 emissions in detail, including in the steel used to make its wind turbines. That fundamental transition is required because the world must make a severe and rapid move away from fossil fuels in order to minimize climate change. ExxonMobil's investors are likely to continue to press the firm to take the next step and explore Scope 3 emissions, but the company is likely to refuse. Investors fear that unless ExxonMobil changes and adapts more fully and rapidly, it will be one of the corporations left behind in the seismic technical and societal transition that shortly will occur. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. It helps others find our content. And please visit techonobots.com for a list of resources and references.